And founder of B&R Computers. Today we're having a webinar on vendor risk. This is in regards to the IRS and the FTC related industries, so tax professionals, accountants, financial industries. So one of the biggest risks to businesses is your vendors. No matter what industry you're in, if you're securing your business, there's a lot of times where breaches happen due to a vendor breach that you use. So with relation to financial advisors and tax professionals, it's even more critical because of the sensitivity of the information that you have. So today is your tax software putting your clients at risk? So we'll go into how critical it is to protect your vendors and making sure that your vendors are secure and how to protect your client data better. So your security is only as strong as the vendors that you trust. So basically your security is only as strong as your weakest link. So vendor risk is the exposure your firm takes on when a third-party software provider, whether it's a cloud service, technology partner, they have access to or handle your client's sensitive data. So their breach becomes your breach. So if you're connected with every vendor who has access to your systems is a potential entry point for attackers, even if your security is perfect. So if you're secure and there's still a breach that happens with a vendor, their breach is your breach. That's why it's critical to take the security of your vendors seriously as well. Data flows out. So client social security numbers, bank accounts, and financials pass through your tax software, cloud storage, email, and payroll systems daily. So you're always working with very sensitive data. And then you're responsible. So under the IRS Publication 4557 and the FTC Safeguards Rule, you are responsible for how your vendors handle your client's data. So as the tax professional, it is your responsibility to ensure that your vendors are handling your client data safely. So 3 ways that a vendor breach exposes your clients. So if the vendor gets hacked, so a cyber criminal breaches your tax software provider's servers directly, your client data that is stored in the cloud is now in the attacker's hands. You did nothing wrong, but your clients are still exposed. I've heard before, my employees are smart, they know what to look for. Well, the problem is if we're not monitoring things, if a vendor is breached, we won't know it. So your employees could be as smart as can be, but your business is still at risk because of a vendor. So a real example is in 2021, a breach at a major tax software provider exposed data for thousands of CPA firms. So thousands of CPA firms who each have probably thousands, at least hundreds, if not thousands of clients apiece. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of records got exposed just from that tax software provider breach. Supply chain attack. So attackers compromise a software update from a trusted vendor. When you install the update, malware comes with it. So now your entire network is infected through software that you trust and use every day. So think about, not singling anyone out, but a common one that is used is Intuit. So, Intuit, if you're using their software, you're relying on them to be sure that they're keeping things up to date, secure, patching vulnerabilities, and then it's your responsibility to then install those updates. So it's kind of, it's important to keep things updated and the trust that you have in your vendors. So a real example is SolarWinds, who is a popular IT software provider. They experienced an attack that infected 18,000 organizations that use SolarWinds through a routine software update, and this included government agencies. So again, 18,000 organizations installed an update and got this infection, including government agencies, and that exposed all of those networks. And then the third most common is credential stuffing. So this is where a vendor that you use, they suffer a data breach and it exposes usernames and passwords. So if you reuse passwords across different platforms, the attackers use those leaked credentials to access your tax portals and client files. So this is why it's important to use different passwords for every platform, login, website that you use, because if one account is breached, if it's the same password and email used multiple places, it's very easy for the criminals to then log into all of your other accounts. So this is why multi-factor authentication on every portal is non-negotiable. So it stops credential stuffing even when passwords are compromised. So think about, again, if your account at one business is compromised, even if you reuse that password for another account, if you've got multi-factor authentication enabled, it's not 100%, but it definitely cuts down the risk of being breached. However, you should still be changing your passwords after finding out that they're breached, just because they are exposed at that point. So every tool that touches your client data is considered a vendor. So it's whether it's your tax software like Drake, ProSeries, Lacerte, TaxSlayer, Thomas Reuters. So your tax software is considered a vendor. Any cloud storage you use, so Google Drive, Dropbox, SharePoint, OneDrive, if you're saving your client's data in those cloud storage services, they're considered a vendor. Emails and communications, so whether it's Microsoft 365, Gmail, the Google suite, not Gmail emails, but the Google suite that's competitor to the Microsoft 365 suite. Zoom, Microsoft Teams. So any way that you communicate with clients, those are considered vendors. And then your payroll platforms. So if you're a bookkeeper, accounting, and you're doing bookkeeping, so ADP, Gusto, Paychex, and QuickBooks, those are all considered vendors that you're using. Client portals. So if you're using something where clients can log into a portal to access their files through you, TaxDome, Canopy, SmartVault, Liscio, those are all considered vendors. And then your IT and managed service provider. So, even like us, we use remote monitoring software, we use backup software. We are considered a vendor to our clients. So, most small businesses, even 1 and 2 employee tax offices, they're like, oh, I'm too small. Well, I mean, if you look at this list, you're using at least a handful of these different platforms. So even though you're too small, you know what to look for, you're secure, you're still exposed on all these fronts. And it is still your responsibility to ensure the security of the data that you're using, or the security of the data that you're passing through any of these platforms. So your legal obligations for third-party vendor management, and this is, the IRS and the FTC. So the IRS publication 4557 requires that you document every vendor with access to client data in your WISP. We did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on creating a WISP, which is an IRS requirement. So you've got to have all of your vendors documented in there, and then accessing the security practices or assess the security practices of each vendor before using them. So, your current vendors, you can reach out and ask them certain questions. Or if you're looking to use a new vendor, you ask these certain questions. It gauges the level of security that these different vendors, how serious they take it. And then you can limit vendor access to only the data that they need. So, if a vendor only needs access to certain clients or certain files, only give them access to that information. If you give them full access to your entire environment and they only need access to a small portion of it, you're overexposing your risk. Limit vendor access to only the data that they know. I'm sorry, we did that one. Require vendors to notify you immediately of any breach. So, if we've seen bookkeepers, we've seen a bookkeeper get breached and they were using QuickBooks and ADP and all these other software, and the criminals got into those accounts of the bookkeeper's clients. So, at that point, you've got to let your vendors know, let your clients know, hey, there was a breach, your information was exposed. And then include vendor termination procedures in your WISP. So again, If you leave one vendor and move to another, there's got to be a termination procedure in place to ensure that all of the sensitive data that they had and held is removed. Review all vendor access annually. So every year, think about the vendors you use, and if there's this is to help if you move vendors and forget to terminate or clean up access, that you're at least doing this annually to just ensure that you're cleaning things up when not needed. And then on to the FTC Safeguard Rules. It requires written contracts with vendors covering data security. So any of the vendors that you use, you've got to have a contract with them that discusses the data security. How are they, what are they doing to protect the data? What are they expecting of you? Because maybe they'll put all the blame on you. So it's important to have contracts to just kind of spell out the data security aspect of the relationship with that vendor. Ongoing monitoring of vendor security practices. So again, you've got to make sure security is not a one-time thing. We do something called a risk assessment. And the risk assessment is something that's much more involved than our risk review. So the risk assessment, when we find out all the risk exposure of a business, we do have prospects say, well, can you just fix that and we're done? Well, the unfortunate thing is security is an ongoing thing. You can resolve all of the issues today, but one software update or one account gets breached, in a week after the assessment, you're exposed again. So that's why it's critical that security is treated as an ongoing thing. And then right to audit vendor security on request. So again, you have the right that if you can audit any of your vendors at any point and just ensure that they're doing their job, to protect your data. So most firms don't have a vendor list at all. And I mean, that's surprising to me because they have no idea where their exposure is. So if you can't name every tool that touches your client data, you're already out of compliance. That list is the foundation of the WISP vendors section. So part of the WISP is to have that list of vendors and who has access to what. So if you don't got that list, you're out of compliance, and being out of compliance can entail fines and even loss of the ability to file taxes. So what you can do this week to get your vendor list under control. It takes a couple days. You can have this all situated. So list every vendor that touches your client data. So think about the different software you use, the different websites you log in, email accounts. Make a list of those now. And then check if each vendor has a published security policy. And it might even be quicker to reach out if you've got a contact at that vendor or if you've got the support information for that vendor, and just ask them what their security policy is. And then enable multi-factor on every vendor portal that you access. So if you can log into a portal, a website, an email account, and it's not asking you for multi-factor, you've got to enable it because it is very important. That's just one very easy layer of security that you can enable that significantly reduces your risk. Remove access for vendors that you no longer use. So, if there's vendors that you used previously and you're not with them anymore, make sure that you're removing their access to mitigate that. Add a vendor list section to your WISP. So again, the WISP has that included. So just make sure that you're filling it out completely. Confirm each vendor has breach notification in their terms. So if a vendor is breached, ensure that in the terms with them, they are obligated to let you know of that breach. Because if they're breached and not obligated to let you know, your client data could already be out on the dark web and you have no idea. So these are questions here. Then the next section here is questions to ask every vendor. So are they SOC 2 Type 2 certified? This proves that they've had an independent security audit. So again, they could say, oh yeah, we've done everything that we can to be secure. Well, the SOC 2 Type 2, it's an independent company that does the audit to ensure that yes, they are taking security seriously. Do you encrypt data at rest and in transit? So the minimum standard of any vendor is holding client data. So if there's so at rest means like thinking about Google Drive or OneDrive, saving files there and leaving them there, that is at rest. In transit means emailing them, or if you have a secure document portal that you upload them, then the client can download them. The encryption along that whole process at rest and in transit is critical. How will you notify us of a breach? So the IRS does require that you document this in your WISP. If you're working with a vendor, you need to know what their breach notification process is. If they don't have one, or if they're not required, or if they don't have it in that they have to notify you, that's a big problem. Who on your staff can access our client data? So this is, again, asking your vendors who at your company can access my customers' data. The least privilege access is the core FTC requirement. So, if an employee of your vendor only needs access to a handful of files, there's no sense in giving them access to everything. And then, can we audit your security controls? So the FTC Safeguards Rule gives you the right that you can audit the security controls of any of your vendors at any time. So do you know every vendor that has access to your clients? Most firms, they can't answer it. They don't know. A business risk assessment helps give you a full picture. So we do a free 30-minute business risk review. We've got a series of questions that we ask. And, if you know the answer, you give it to us. If you're not sure, we'll make a note. And then at the end of this free 30-minute risk review, we will, within a day or two, we will provide you with a summary of our discussion. It'll outline in there, what you weren't sure of, and it'll have some level of, these are the steps you can take to help mitigate, fix the problems, mitigate the risk. And if you've already got an IT provider, you can take this list back to them and say, hey, I wasn't sure about this answer. And then they can tell you. And then that way, if you like working with them and you want to stay with them, they can help you fix everything using the summary that we provide. If you don't have a company, or if you're looking to switch providers, we can definitely help resolve the issues in the list that we provide to you. But our risk review call is not a change vendors call. There's no risk, there's no obligation. We do it for free. We're just trying to make sure that businesses are safe. So if you've got any questions, or if you'd like to schedule a risk review, businessrisk.bnrcomputers.com. That has our calendar, and you can schedule your risk review right there. So I appreciate your time, and that's all that I've got today. Thank you for joining.